I rise this evening to mark the solemn anniversary of the racist mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. On this day, 2 years ago, good people who simply made an afternoon stop at a grocery store were gunned down in broad daylight. 10 innocent lives stolen from friends, families, and our community. It's important that their names continue to live on in our hearts and in the record. Celestine Cheney, Roberta A. Drury, Andre McNeil, Catherine Massey, Margus D. Morrison, Hayward Patterson, Aaron Salter Jr., Geraldine Talley, Ruth Whitfield, and Pearl Young. The perpetrator was not from the city of good neighbors. This racist, white supremacist intentionally came to our community and targeted the only grocery store in a predominantly black neighborhood. Every Western New Yorker remembers the first phone call we received, the horror as we realized the full extent of what had happened, and then the heartbreak of burying people whose lives were taken simply for the color of their skin. It has changed Buffalo forever. But rather than divide us, the people of Buffalo came together, as we often do during the toughest of times, embracing one another and championing for change. We prayed together. We fed our Cold Springs neighbors who were forced into a food desert with the closing of their only grocery store, and we rallied for change. My dear friend, now Buffalo Common Councilwoman Zanetta Everhart nearly lost her son, Zaire Goodman, that day. Zaire worked at Tops. He was just doing his job, helping a customer, when a bullet entered his neck. He fell to the ground, and when the shooter moved on, he was able to escape and place the most terrifying phone call of his mother's life. Miraculously, by the grace of God, Zaire is alive and thriving today. I had the privilege of joining Zanetta as she traveled right here to Washington and testified before Congress, refusing to hold back details as she explained the horror of what had happened to Zaire and the other victims. Zanetta gave powerful testimony, along with former Fire Commissioner Garnell Whitfield, whose 86-year-old mother was murdered right in front of Zaire when he was carrying her groceries to her car for her. Zanetta and Garnell were supported in their testimony by the families of the other Buffalo victims. And for the first time in 30 years, Congress acted, passing the Safer Communities Act. Still, in the 2 years since the Buffalo tragedy, senseless mass shootings have continued throughout the nation. More cities and families have endured the pain of burying their loved ones due to gun violence. We need to do better. That means passing Representative Macbeth's assault weapons ban of 2023, Representative Clyburn's Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2023, Representative Fitzpatrick's Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2023, Representative Mang's Aaron Salter Jr.'s Responsible Body Armor Possession Act, Representative Krishnamurthy's Hate Crimes Commissions Act, Representative Bowman's resolution condemning the Great Replacement Theory, and Representative Schiff's Equal Access to Justice for Victims of Gun Violence Act of 2023, just to name a few. But this package represents common sense legislation that rejects hate and will help keep weapons of war out of the hands of dangerous individuals. Public safety is not a partisan issue. Mass murders like the one that happened in Buffalo happens in red states and blue states, cities and suburbs, farming communities, schools, churches, synagogues, mosques, grocery stores, all across this nation. And it shouldn't happen at all. Further action is needed, and it's long overdue. We must find common ground to stop the pain felt by our community in Buffalo, but so many other communities across this nation. Buffalo and Western New York will continue to persevere as we always do. These past few days have been a roller coaster of emotions, to say the least. As we relive these awful moments of 2 years ago today and continue down the path of honoring and remembering the lives that were lost. On Monday, just yesterday, we unveiled the final design for the 514 Memorial that will be built in Buffalo. It's an amazing concept, and it will serve as a permanent testament to the character of our city and the beautiful commemoration of the victims of this hate crime. It features 10 interconnected pillars, each inscribed with the names of the victims and survivors. Each one unique in its arc and height, reflective of the uniqueness and irreplaceability of each of the victims. And it will feature a new building to serve as a gathering place to bring the community together, to unite us. When it's completed, I hope my colleagues will join me to visit this moving space, this memorial, to gain a greater understanding for the loss that we've experienced and perhaps a greater commitment to preventing future tragedies. Following the shooting, an impromptu memorial sprung up at the corner of Jefferson and Landon Streets. The corner was filled with flowers, toys, photos, candles, cards, and much more. Much of that was archived at the Buffalo History Museum to make way for a permanent honor space. Today, that space at the Tops on Jefferson was dedicated, permanently commemorating the lives that were lost at that location, ensuring that the supermarket, already a neighborhood landmark, becomes a living memorial. And as we honor these beautiful souls, it's important that we take a moment to thank the brave first responders who got there almost immediately that day to secure the scene, tend to the wounded, and prevent more bloodshed. The Buffalo Police Department had the suspect in custody within 6 minutes of the first 911 call. But because of the weapons of war that this terrorist had, he was able to inflict horrible damage in a very short amount of time. These 10 people taken from us 2 years ago today aren't just statistics. They were mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, leaders in our community. I'd like to take a moment to talk about each of them. Pearl Young. Pearl Young was 77 years old. Pearl was a native of Fayette, Alabama, coming to Buffalo following her marriage to Oliver Young Jr. in 1967. She was a substitute teacher, a Sunday school teacher, and an active member of the Church of God in Christ, where she helped to run the food pantry for a quarter of a century. She was the loving mother of James, Pamela, and Damon, sister of Annie Ruth Winston and Jean Craig, grandmother to 10, great-grandmother to 7, and beloved by countless nieces and nephews. Ruth Whitfield. Ruth Whitfield was 86 years old. She was a longtime parishioner at Durham Memorial AME Zion Church, where she sang in the choir. She was a devoted wife, caring for her husband and soulmate, Garnell Whitfield, of 68 years, nearly every day, for 8 years in a nursing home. Everything from clipping his nails to doing his laundry, and of course, visiting him on a daily basis. She left behind her husband, Garnell Whitfield Sr., her children, Robin Harris, former Buffalo Fire Commissioner Garnell Whitfield Jr., Angela Crawley, and Raymond Whitfield. 9 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren, 5 great-great-grandchildren, and numerous extended family. Margus D. Morrison. Margus Morrison was 52 years old, one of 3 brothers, and graduated from Bennett High School in 1990. Margus was a bus aide for the Buffalo Public Schools Stanley Makowski Early Childhood Center. His colleagues remembered him as a punctual, reliable, and filled with a wonderful sense of humor. When he was killed, he was out buying Saturday evening dinner for his family. Margus Morrison left behind his 6 beloved children and his adored companion of the last 25 years, Regina Patterson. Andre McNeil. Andre McNeil was 53 years old and a brother to 7 siblings. He was a Buffalo native, attending South Park High School. He loved basketball, playing guitar, writing poetry, listening to music, and of course, spending time with his family, including his fiancée, Tracy Masurlovich. He was the adoring father to his 5 children, Chandra Rogers, Andrea Beckman, Leandra Elliott, Deja Brown, and Andre McNeil Jr., known affectionately as AJ. When Andre was murdered, he was out buying a birthday cake for AJ's 3rd birthday. He also left behind 8 siblings, brothers, Yvonne James Elliott, Marcus Elliott, Malik Elliott, and Jimmy Elliott, and sisters, Andrea Anna Unique Porter, Rose White, Darlissa Elliott, and Marchette Elliott, as well as 3 grandchildren, numerous aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, and friends. Aaron Salter Jr., Lieutenant Aaron Salter Jr. was 55 years old. He died a hero, delaying the shooter and giving more people precious seconds to escape. He saved lives that day. Lieutenant Salter was a retired Buffalo police officer working that day as an armed security guard. When the shooter walked in, armed with an AR-15 style rifle and clad in body armor, Lieutenant Salter didn't hesitate. He opened fire, hitting the target. But because of the shooter's body armor, he was unharmed and fired back, killing Lieutenant Salter. After Lieutenant Salter retired from the Buffalo Police Department in 2018, he began working as a security guard at Tops, where he'd engage with customers and employees, making everyone feel safe, seen, and appreciated. He was the son of Carol and Aaron Salter Sr., the husband to Kimberly, adoring father to Letitia Slaughter, Aaron Salter III, and Tanya Salter. Lieutenant Salter also leaves behind a sister, Cashel Durham, nieces, nephews, cousins, friends, and his beloved pets. Geraldine Talley, known as Jerry to her friends and family, was 62 years old. She was a native of Grove Hill, Alabama, moving to Buffalo in 1971 with her family. She earned her degree in secretarial science from Bryan and Stratton College, eventually working for a nonprofit assisting people with mental illness and related substance abuse issues. She was famous for her love of baking and for sharing her creations with others. Her specialty was banana pudding cakes. When she was at Tops, she was shopping for a few ingredients for her weekly waterfront picnic with her fiancé. She left behind her children, Genesia Smith and Mark Talley Jr., stepdaughter, Marquise Jacobs, 3 sisters and 1 brother, her beloved fiancé, Gregory Allen, and numerous family and friends. Catherine Massey. Catherine Massey, known to many simply as Cat, was 72 years old. Cat worked for 40 years for Blue Cross Blue Shield and was always committed to the betterment of our community. She worked to educate kids on healthy diets, to rid our nation of gun violence, and to beautify her neighborhood. In fact, she was a longtime campaigner against gun violence, founding We Are Women Warriors with her beloved friends Betty Jean Grand and Dr. Eva Doyle. She was a regular contributor to the Buffalo Challenger and the Buffalo Criterion. Kat was also an active resident in Buffalo's Fruit Belt neighborhood, helping to form a block club and successfully lobbying for the creation of a new public park on her home street of Cherry Street. She was survived by her dear siblings, Barbara Mapps and Warren Massey, as well as her adored nieces and nephews, Adriana Massey, Damone Mapps, Damian Mapps, Darrell, Demetrius, and Dawn Massey, numerous great nieces and nephews, and 1 great niece. Roberta A. Drury. Roberta Drury was 32 years old. She was originally from Cicero, New York, attending Cicero North Syracuse High School. It was her love for family that brought her to Buffalo, relocating to our community to help care for her brother who was recovering from his battle with leukemia. Her greatest passion was family, highlighted by their annual trips to Wildwood, New Jersey. She was survived by her dear mother, Leslie Van Giesen, father, Philip Drury, grandfather, John Traeger, her beloved siblings, Christopher Moyer, Daniel Moyer, Amanda Drury, Nicole Van Giesen, and Brett Van Giesen, as well as numerous aunts, uncles, nephews, cousins, and friends. Hayward Patterson. Hayward Patterson was 67 years old. He was in his truck, waiting for a friend. He drove to Tops to pick up groceries, something he did often. He was a deacon at the State Tabernacle Church of God in Christ in Buffalo, located on Glenwood Avenue, reflecting his devotion and faith in God. According to his fellow churchgoers, Deacon Patterson was often the first one to arrive and the last to leave. He helped open and close the church, clean, shovel. He volunteered in every capacity, including in the church's soup kitchen, Plate of Love ministry. He is survived by his 3 children, Deanna, Sharita, and Jake, his beloved wife, Terza, as well as his parents, siblings, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and many more. Celestine Cheney. Celestine Cheney was 65 years old. When she was killed, she was out purchasing ingredients for strawberry shortcake for her family. And she was a fighter, surviving 3 aneurysms and breast cancer. Celestine was a graduate of Fosdick Maston Girls Vocational High School, where she learned to sew, later attending Bryant Stratton College for Business Administration. She worked at several large manufacturers, including M. Weil and New Era Cap. She attended Elim Christian Fellowship Church in Buffalo. And she was survived by her beloved partner and fiance, Raymond Johnson, her only son, Wayne Donnell Jones, 9 grandchildren, Wayne Donnell Jones Jr., Kayla Jones, Sharon Reed, Shayna Jones, Donnell Jones, Nasir Jones, Dominique Brown, Latifah Johnson, and Latoya Bow. 9 great-grandchildren, 1 sister, Joanne Daniel, and a host of nieces and nephews. To conclude my remarks, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that my colleagues and those in the gallery join me in a moment of silence on behalf of the beautiful souls who were stolen from the city of Buffalo 2 years ago today, on May 14th, 2022. Thank you.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Mr. Speaker, I now yield my time. It is my honor to yield my time to my colleague, Rep. Clyburn from South Carolina, who is here. I recognize my colleague, Rep. Clyburn, the sponsor of the Enhanced Background Checks Act, to speak.
I thank the gentleman for giving me this time, Mr. Speaker. As we mark the 2nd anniversary of the tragic events that unfolded on May 14th, 2022, at the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, New York, it's a solemn reminder of the devastating impact of hate-fueled violence. This was not just an attack on innocent individuals, but an assault on the very fabric of the Buffalo community. A self-professed white supremacist targeted the Tops supermarket and drove more than 200 miles to get there. Because of its location in a predominantly black community, his actions took 10 precious lives. There were sons, daughters, parents, and friends whose absences continued to be felt deeply. The pain New Yorkers feel is known all too well by us down in South Carolina. In 2015, a white supremacist walked into the Mother Emanuel, the oldest African-American Methodist church in the South. Dylan Roof targeted that church because of its historical significance. He worshiped with them, he prayed with them. He was welcome into their Bible study with open arms. And he repaid that kindness by opening fire on the innocent group of worshipers, killing 9. These horrific acts must serve as a stark reminder of the dangerous consequences of online radicalization, racism, and the all too easy access to weapons of war. The Buffalo shooter's online writings praised Roof's actions. And although he obtained his weapon legally, the shooter made illegal modifications to make them much more deadly. In the case of Mother Emanuel AME Church, a simple background check could have helped to prevent the tragedy. Roof never should have been allowed to buy a gun, but a deadly loophole in our federal laws allowed him to do just that. If the required background checks process takes more than 3 business days, the Charleston loophole allows firearms to be transferred to buyers before the process is complete. That's how Roof was able to get a gun. I've introduced legislation to close the Charleston loophole, which the gentleman from New York has joined as a co-sponsor, and I thank him for that. That only solves one piece of the puzzle. Our communities have emerged from these tragedies stronger than ever. But white supremacy is a scourge on our society that we must confront head on. We must join together to push back against the harmful ideologies that tear us apart. Representative Kennedy, thank you for your leadership, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.